Hello, welcome to my podcast, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, best-selling author of Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to my platform, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as hitting that like button and sharing your comments to grow the algorithm. You could also follow us in the podcast in the audio syndicated version on mindbodyspirit.fm. Today's guest in The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is Steven Gavrielatos. Steven is a well-known social media influencer. He talks about all things relating to fragrances, which is getting so much attraction these days, in particular. But he's also has an incredible mind. He's going to be sharing a lot of his own inner insights and spiritual transformations, as well as uncovering and unraveling uh, the fragrances, the olfactory zones, and its spiritual, psychological, and emotional significance. So, without further ado, we bring on Stephen, aka Mr. Adolescence, on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Stephen Gavrielatos, it's a big honor to have you here, on my platform. Thank you so much for coming on.
The pleasure is all mine, Jacob. Of course, as you know, I've known you for many, many years. I've watched your show. I've listened to so many of the episodes, and I really appreciate all of the wisdom and the direction that you've taken the show in. And so, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, no, and likewise, Stephen, and my audience is going to be introduced to you, which is, it's a very unique direction for the channel, and your work is very, no pun intended, niche.
Yeah.
But I think we're gonna really get a lot of this conversation, and, I likewise have been a big super fan of yours for so many years, and, it's like we were speaking before, like, I just name dropped you to, like, a client of mine, and he's like, "Oh my god, you're gonna talk to this man?" He just couldn't believe it. So I feel the same way, like, I get starstruck sometimes too, and, just blown away that you're here. But for
I
my
appreciate that.
viewers, yeah, no, I'm sure, and for my viewers, could you tell us a little bit about, Steven the man today and how that came into being? Because you're really making your mark and you're this tremendous influencer, but I'm just that doesn't just start, from, like, waking up one day and, had to have a series of events to lead you to where you are today, but just interested for viewers to really hear your story.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jacob. It didn't happen overnight. So, obviously, this is a labor of love, and this is the culmination of over a decade's worth of work. And to be honest, my passion with fragrances really started when I was about 10 years old. And I was always into fragrance, always had several bottles of eau de toilette in my collection. Even when I was in high school, I had like 25 to 30 bottles. And I have my mother to thank for a lot of that because she would buy me bottle after bottle after bottle. As a matter of fact, I remember my very first acquisition was CKB by Calvin Klein. And this is
Oh,
when I was about 10 years old. Very classic, then, musky, clean, versatile. And it wasn't until 2011, I wanna say, when I started watching video reviews on YouTube. And I said,
right.
"Wait a minute, there's this whole other world of fragrance aficionados out there." And I wanted to make my presence known because I said, "I'm also this fragrance crazed individual, and I would love for people to know that I too am somewhat in the, fragrance spotlight, as it were." And so I created my channel and, to my surprise and bewilderment at times, I was getting a lot of requests to review more fragrances. And I said, well, this can't be true, right? There are actually people out there that are so interested in learning about the notes and the smell and the performance and the longevity and the compositional nature of fragrances. And now it's culminated to me having published thousands of videos, and I'm across all the different platforms that you can imagine. And now I've done a little bit of writing, a little bit of creative direction. And so I am fully immersed into the perfume world, as it were. But it's such a blessing for me, and it's something that I love to do. And, as the Confucian analect goes, if you get a job doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so, I wake up every morning with such fervor and such verve to be able to do what I do. So it truly is a blessing.
Yeah, and what I love about your work is the passion is undeniable as well as the detail orientation. Like when and I encourage my viewers to check out your channel, like when you listen to Steven's videos, he's like a walking encyclopedia, and you could tell this is really such a big part of yourself. But I've been noticing, and this has been featured on a lot of platforms, that there seems to be like an explosion of interest, particularly with teenagers and fragrances, the last couple years. And I'm wondering from you, from personally as well as objectively, why do you feel people are so drawn to fragrances? Like, what does it bring to them in their lives? Would you say?
I think it's multi-pronged. I think especially among the younger generation, I think we see the preponderance of fragrance being mentioned in the media, music videos. Their famous celebrities are posting Instagram stories about what fragrances they're wearing. And so I think it definitely piques that innate curiosity of, wait, what is this bottle? Right. And it's kind of like this aha moment that I had when I was, 23, 24, and I discovered the world of niche. But I think a lot of it is because fragrance is it's an olfactory accessory, the same way people might not wanna wear the same necktie every day, they might not wear the same belt every day. They're realizing that they don't necessarily have to wear the same fragrance every day. So I think a lot of people have sort of abandoned the concept of a signature scent in place or in lieu of a fragrance wardrobe, wherein they're acknowledging that, okay, we have fragrances for formal occasions, casual occasion.
Mhm,
We have fragrances for the colder weather, the hotter weather. We have fragrances for a date night, fragrances for the office, so on and so forth. So I think that diversification is certainly something that we should be welcoming, especially considering the fact that I think with that exploration also comes education. So they're finding all of these different olfactive profiles, but at the end of the day, they're familiarizing themselves with what they're personally interested in. Oh, I like the aquatics. I don't like the florals. I like the woods. I don't like the resins, so on and so
mhm,
forth. And fragrance, and I think this is I think the major point that we should get to is that it's a spirit lifter. It's a pick me
mhm,
up, it's a mood enhancer, it makes you feel great about yourself. It elevates your mood and your aura. It makes you feel so good, you know? There are many times when you're feeling down and you spray on your favorite fragrance, one that inspires confidence and just assertiveness, maybe
mhm.
if that's what you're going for on that day. But fragrance definitely has the ability to do that. So the way that it's tied in with the psychological aspects of our being are very, very impressive.
Yeah, and I just love everything that you just unloaded there. I mean, I'm also curious too in the brain in its association with scent because, some like it's like with music too. Like you'll hear a song, it may not be the greatest song, but if it's like a total package and it took you back to that period, is that a part of it too, where it brings up nostalgia for people or evokes memories of times that might have lost their grip that people want to hold on to?
I think so too. If you find a perfume that is, say, a gourmand, which is a perfume that is very edible, right? It smells edible. You don't want to drink it, but
Yeah.
it might smell like a cookie or maybe a dessert, vanilla, hazelnut, whipped cream, almond, so on and so forth. I've heard many stories about people who say, I really like wearing this gourmand because it reminds me of when my grandmother was alive and she would cook or bake things in the kitchen. And that aroma, that pleasant, decadent aroma would be emanating throughout the house. And I would smell it in my bedroom as I woke up on Sunday mornings. And, a lot of people have these very personal ties and associations with the sense of smell. So I certainly understand people pursuing different olfactive profiles for nostalgic reasons.
Mhm,
And I think another aspect to it is that while it can be evocative of the past, it can also be a marker for the future. And what happens is, and it's very, Pavlovian in the sense that, let's say you buy a brand new fragrance that you've never worn before, and you tell yourself, I'm going to go on vacation. And, I really want to make it special, but I want this to be a vacation that I'm going to remember 5, 10, 20 years down the line. You spray a fragrance for the first time ever on this vacation. And then when you smell it again 6 months later, it's like, this reminds
mhm.
me of being in the Dominican Republic, or it
And
reminds me of being in Aruba or something like that. So it definitely has this ability to trigger your memory. But I think people are realizing now that it's something that can be done consciously. And
mm,
I think that's what's interesting.
yeah. And, I think an interesting twist of our conversation is the bind between fragrances and spirituality, and something that I would like to get into a little bit because that's, I'm sure, like a big, I've noticed like a big topic of yourself. But for instance, I'll give you one segue to that example. When I work frequently with a lot of evidential mediums, who are board certified, tested, everything.
Mm.
And when I'm, working alongside them, I notice that they'll describe like one of the clairs. I forget which one, but one of the clairs, which is a French word for like seeing the unseen in a way, has to deal with scent. And they'll bring forward a loved one, and they'll probably describe, okay, your loved one smells like polo green, which probably most of the gentlemen probably wore in the 70s or 80s, and I still wear it to this day. But it seems like that's just a big part of so many people on the other side, where it's just like, "This is my signature fragrance. This is who I am. I want you to remember this me by." But I have a feeling that's gonna be a little bit more complicated when we cross over, because we wear, like, 100 different fragrances, so we're gonna be having giving the medium a hard time. But, yeah, it just really shows, like, how, like, like how people will carry over things that you might gloss over, saying that's not spiritual, that's materialistic, whatever, but that's such a part of their journey. I mean, what do you think about that?
That's really interesting. You hear about clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, and to know that there is a clair associated with the olfactive aspects,
Yes.
I don't see why not. I mean, a lot of what we do, everything that we do is energy. We emit energy with our thoughts and our feelings, our emotions. And if fragrance is intrinsically tied to all of these things, our emotions, the way that we feel, because we know we can have a fragrance that is tied in with maybe a negative experience that we've had in our past. And now we can't even smell it anymore. Like I know people who say, like nothing to do with like an eau de parfum or a fine fragrance, but I've heard from people who say, I can't uh, stand the smell of vodka anymore because I went to a party when I was in college and now just even smelling it makes me want to retch. So, I completely understand that, but there's definitely a spiritual and metaphysical aspect to fragrances. And I mean, even perfume is biblically rooted. When you think about, the word perfume and what it means through smoke. And we're talking about incense. And of course, when you go back to the birth of the baby Jesus, we're talking about frankincense and myrrh. And so, which are common ingredients in perfumes. But I think there is a very strong spiritual aspect tied to perfumes, but a lot of it is existing in the invisible world. So, a lot of it we can't perceive and we can't really pin down in a tactile manner, but we have to sort of trust that it's there. And I totally believe the conversations that you've had with the mediums who say that, no, yeah, I was perceiving a certain smell, but as far as you and I are concerned, they're just going to say, wow, he was a smelly guy. I can't
He was a fragrant man. It is like a blender of like, top notes, bottom notes, mid, and they're just
everything.
they'll have to get very specific to really, dial down. Was it toilette? Was it parfum? Was it, heavily concentrated? Not like, we're gonna have to get very specific. I mean,
Yeah.
in many ways, mediums are just secretaries of the dead, and all they're doing is just taking messages from not the dead, but those who crossed over.
Yeah.
So we're gonna give them a run for their money. I have a feeling.
I think so too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but even cigars, like, those come in, but I do notice fragrances, like loved ones will describe, mediums will describe that in terms of, wearing loved ones. Back to, like, yourself, like, I've, obviously been a big fan. If I could have my pom-poms and cheerleader outfit, I probably would for Steven. For you, I mean, because 'cause you've grown so much throughout
Yeah.
the years. But, I've noticed, I don't know necessarily how like intentional this is, but there's been a shift in yourself, it seems, just in just your connection to spirituality, and trying to really infiltrate that a little bit, subtly or not subtly in your work. But can you, just out of curiosity, where did this kind of shift start with you? Because it seemed like over the last couple of years you've really drawn, I'd say you really have had a big shift, in yourself, spiritually.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's a very deep question, quite loaded in my response, I suppose. But I think it all started with me just trying to put myself into alignment. And
Mm,
you do so many things in life and you feel unfulfilled, and you say like, "Is this really what I'm meant to be doing for the rest of my life? Or are my efforts being acknowledged the way that I want them to be acknowledged? Or am I meant to do something bigger? And maybe not even necessarily bigger or better, but something that feels more effortless for me, something that flows better for me." And, fragrance was always this thing in the back of my mind, in the back of my nape. And I said, "I'm going to eventually do something with it full time. I just don't know how to pursue it." And you mentioned spirituality, and again, the spiritual world for me is the unseen world. And a lot of times we tap into it through meditation, through prayer, through many other, methods. And I guess for me, it's that, there were times when I found myself in moments of despondency and helplessness. And maybe I was a little bit confused about where I should be going from here. And there were times when I would ask God or the universe for signs. And, I had a really interesting sign. Well, I've had a series of signs, but I've had a really interesting sign back in November of last year. And it kind of solidified everything. And it was something where as soon as it happened to me, I sort of backed away and I said, okay, I'm done asking for signs because I think this kind of sealed the deal, right? Like this was the cherry on top. But it's with regard to our mutual friend, Carlos Powell,
Mm,
who passed away.
right.
And I would like to take a moment to share this story because I think it's very poignant for me at least. And for me, it kind of reassured and reaffirmed my faith, you know? And so just to give a little bit of context for the viewers, there was a fragrance reviewer by the name of Carlos Powell who went by the title Brooklyn Fragrance Lover on YouTube, Instagram, all the social media platforms. And he was a very close friend of mine. I knew him for about 9 years. Since the pandemic, like he would spend nights sleeping over my house. We recorded tons of videos together. Like he was a salt of the earth kind of person. And he passed away in 2021 from a heart attack. Well, I think about him all the time, right? He was he was my best friend at the time, Dominican and Panamanian. And, I pray to God for him every day. And, he's always in my thoughts. And I always kind of feel his presence very strongly. And I specifically recall on November 17th, I was in Mexico City, Mexico, in the Polanco neighborhood in a Hyatt Regency. And I was sitting on a chair in front of the computer desk that was in my hotel room. And there is something that I've been praying for like 15 months now. And it still hasn't happened. But I said, God, I believe you're real. I believe there's a greater power out there. And, if you're listening, can you please bring this into my existence? I'm really trying to manifest this and it would make me so happy and it would heal something in me if it were to happen. And then I started thinking about my friend Carlos. And I said, Carlos, if God's not real, then maybe you're not in heaven. And so I'm going to reach out to you as well. And it was a very vulnerable moment for me. And I said, I'm going to reach out to you and I would love it if you could send me a sign. So I kind of dropped it at that. And then 2 days later, on November 19th, I come back to the States. And on November 20th, I had two events in Manhattan. And I said, let me get to Manhattan pretty early because there's always rush hour traffic and I live in New Jersey. So I caught an Uber to Manhattan and I said, my goodness, I got here an hour early. What am I going to do? Right. So I started walking up West Broadway and I was wearing my gray suit and I had my briefcase in my hand. And I just had this feeling, this gut feeling, this premonition, as it were, that somebody was about to approach me. And I said, somebody's going to approach me right now. And I don't know why I had that thought. Within 4 seconds, this really tall Hispanic gentleman approaches me and he goes, "You're that guy who talks about perfumes on YouTube." And I said, "Yeah, that's me." He's like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. My name is Engelbert." He goes, "Listen, I need a recommendation for a fragrance, $100, but it can't be too strong because my wife doesn't like them strong." I said, "Okay." So I'm talking to him for about 5 minutes or something like that. And then as I'm getting ready to say goodbye, he turns to me and he says, "Look, I need to tell you something. And I know you're not going to believe me because I'm a stranger to you, but I had a dream with Carlos in it. And
Oh,
Carlos told me God is real and everything's okay."
wow.
and
Ooh.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And here I am in New York, and I'm, like, still kind of writing that despondency from a couple days prior, and I'm like, "Man, I just
Mhm.
don't know what the future has in store and how things are gonna pan out," but then that happened, and it's like if I didn't wanna go to these events, by the way, because I was not in the mood, but I said, "I'm gonna go to the events, I'm gonna go early." I got there early, I'm gonna walk up the block, and so if it weren't for all of these variables coming into play, that synchronistic event would not have
Mhm.
happened, it just made a
Wow.
believer out of me.
Mm. And Steven, I couldn't thank you enough for evoking Carlos and, continuing on his legacy, and I'm sure he's just so proud, of your work and how I mean, for you, it's just part of how we keep those who have crossed over alive is by continuing their legacy, and I couldn't think of a greater homage to a man with the man that you are continuing to morph into be, and how that is really, a part of honoring Carlos. It almost reminds me of Ralph Macchio in The Karate Kid with, what's his name? Jesus, I was just watching it the other day.
Miyagi? Is it
Yeah,
Miyagi?
Mr. Miyagi, like, Carlos is kinda like, he's like family, but kinda like, in a way, that's like your genesis right now with what you do to somebody. It's like out of homage. But, we
Thank
call those in the spirit realm NOEs, like no other explanation. Like, there can't like, what is the mathematical probability of you going into the city, having a specific question, and having someone come up at this exact time right to you with millions of people around you? What are the chances? It's just, you can't explain it. So, I'm so glad you got that degree of validation, and hopefully that allowed it seemed like that ascended, not only your belief, but also your grief processing with Carlos in a way, would you say? Like, that degree of belief tends to work well with grief.
100%. And it also reaffirmed that whenever you're talking to the spirit world, people are listening, whether that be God or those who have passed on or so I think it also brings a certain sense of comfort and solace, knowing that, your words aren't going to, dissipate in the ether or something like that. There's somebody on the receiving end. So
Mhm. Yeah. And, Carlos, true to form, as you live here, you go over there, and he was a conductor and a uniter over here. He loved networking. And that's
yeah,
probably why we're having this conversation, his memory, because we probably connected through him. Like, he was the ultimate networker over here and, true to form over there. Like, he could, if he knows how to pull strings over here, imagine what you could do when you're unlimited over there. So, very true
that's
to
right.
form.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely true. Yeah. And I know you would often tune into his live streams on YouTube and
Oh, yeah.
I know he loved you from the bottom of his heart and he and I had conversations about you too. So he was definitely a uniter and a collaborator, that's for sure.
I'll tell you, you see that picture behind me? It's of Sedona, Arizona. And I
Okay, yeah.
remember, listening to a Carlos Powell Facebook Live video and just chiming in while I was right next to that mountain, and Carlos
Mm,
goes and I got the Buddha behind me, and Carlos goes, "Hey, Jacob, namaste, peace." He could understand people, like, he got people, he could sum you
yeah,
up pretty quick. He could get a read on people, and just, like, yeah, so many times right now between the Buddha, Sedona, talking to you, it's just like there's a timelessness that connects us to Carlos, and,
that's beautiful.
he just was larger than life in so many areas. But, regarding spirituality and fragrances, it seems like also a part of it has to deal with the power of intention with, like, saying, "Hey, I'm gonna spray this on today, and this is what I'm intending for the day." Is that something that you notice with people where they're just there's a degree of manifestation and an intention with this stuff too, right?
All the time. Like there's this one brand called Filippo Sorcinelli, and their fragrances are very heavy on woods and smokes and incense, amber, resins, so on and so forth. And one thing that I always say is if you want to come across smelling very mysterious and enigmatic,
Mhm,
you're going to wear a Filippo Sorcinelli fragrance. And I know a lot of people, and I've often made this recommendation in my videos as well. If you want to convey this aura of mysteriousness, you're going to wear these fragrances, right? Now, of course, there are people who want to convey an aura of confidence. They wanna put on something that they know has mass appeal, something that has a very high compliment factor, and for good reason, of course. And so they're gonna wear something that is maybe fresh, citrus driven, ozonic, clean, oceanic, soapy, so on and so forth. And of course, there's also perfumes that will convey femininity. And those can be ones that are quite heavy on the florals, especially the clean white floral ingredients: jasmine, gardenia, tuberose, iris, so on and so forth. So I think a lot of it is being done intentionally nowadays. I think back in the day, maybe, people would see an ad in the magazines or on TV and they're like, ooh, Dracar Noir, like, how could a man wears this? And then
Yeah.
they've been wearing it for the past 20 years, which is
Mhm.
fine. Like, if that's what you like and that's how you got hooked on it, I think that's fantastic. But I think nowadays people are more keen on the more exploratory aspects of it, where they'll
Mhm.
will walk into a department store and they'll try everything that they see on the counter and they're like, "You know what? I really like this one, not because it has iris or rose, not because it lasts 8 hours, not because the brand is Tom Ford, not because of this, not because of that, but I like this because of how it makes me feel." And so I really love to see the prioritization of one's feelings and that emotional connection with fragrance, because at the end of the day, it is an emotional thing. It's funny. There are so many other senses that we explore, like the gustatory sense, right? We eat something. And a lot of times, yeah, we eat food for nourishment. We do it for the macronutrients, the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, so on and so forth. But we also do it because, and this is where I guess it gave birth to the term comfort food. We do it because of the way that it makes us feel. And like we say, I am in the mood to have pizza today. I am in the mood for pasta. So if that can be done with food, with movies, I am in the mood for a horror film, I'm in the mood for a comedy. Why can't it be done with fragrance? Fragrance shouldn't be like this very sort of you know, what's the word that I'm looking for? This very sort of functional thing where it's like, "Nope, I have to go with this because it's professional." It's like, "No, what are you in the mood for?" Like, pick
Oh
up and see
yeah.
what you're gravitating towards on a given day. So, there's definitely a spiritual aspect to it, and it's so closely intertwined with how we feel. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that needs to be put on the pedestal a little bit more.
Yeah. And I even think with my clients, there seems to be a tie spirituality ties itself into mental health, but I think there's a tie-in with mental health as well with fragrances because, yes, it could elevate your mood. It could be intentional, but it also just allows you to see this day as unique and for you to put this stamp on this day and to own this day and to take it as a gift. And so many people just like I think part of depression is like you're living like 95 years and you haven't lived one day and every day is kind of the same way versus like, no, this is a unique day. How do I make it as unique as possible? And fragrance seems to be, one of those big ingredients with that intention. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people, you know, within mental health, conditions like coming up to you or your podcast or your channel and talking about fragrances. Could you speak a little bit about the crossover that maybe olfactory fragrances, you know, and Fragcom has in terms of enhancing one's mental health, journey?
I think that's a fantastic question. So they did a study, um, on a molecule known as helium, and it was first used by Christian Dior. The perfumer's name, I believe, is Rudnitska, and it was used as a filler. It made the perfume very diffusive, but it also has the ability to target the pleasure centers of the brain. And so there are a lot of brands nowadays, like one of them being Initio Parfum Privé, that uses helium in half of their fragrances. And they did a study where they had mammalian participants smell helium alongside another clean floral smelling ingredient, but those who smelled helium had a sex differentiated response. And so I know this is often talked about in aromatherapy, and like it was said that the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans wore rosemary around their necks when they were studying because it promotes memorization and memory retention. I know cinnamon is supposed to whet the appetite. I know vanilla is said to be an aphrodisiac, and recent studies have even concluded that the smell of pumpkin is an aphrodisiac. So it's 100% connected with mental health. I think we just have to learn how to manipulate that. And I know it's not a one size fits all thing because of the nature of the subjectivity of fragrances. And so, kind of going back to like the vodka story, you might have a perfume that you smell that you have a negative association with because,
Mhm,
maybe, oh, my abusive stepdad wore this cologne, 15 years ago, and I can't stand the smell of it, even though it might contain some really nice, hearty, positive ingredients, or ones that would have a positive verdict in some kind of a scientific study or whatever. So I think because it's so highly idiosyncratic and individualized,
mhm,
it's hard to create this sort of one size fits all prescription for everybody.
mhm,
But I think generally speaking, there are certain ingredients that have a profound effect on one's mental state.
mhm,
And
right,
I think a lot more research needs to be done into that. I know for me personally, I love citrus. Whenever I smell grapefruit or yuzu, bergamot, orange, lemon, whatever
mhm,
the case may be, it's so energizing. It's so invigorating. I spray on like a citrus heavy cologne. I feel like I'm ready to tackle the day. I can walk out of the
mhm,
house and I can accomplish anything that I want.
mhm,
And then, of course, when I'm feeling more pensive, more meditative,
mhm,
I will put on something with amber or something with frankincense. And it's even that evocation, specifically, somebody wearing like a frankincense based fragrance, you're reminded of being in church. And
mhm,
so now you have these subconscious associations that have clicked. And you might really end up loving the fragrance, not because you particularly love the smell, but because of the memories that it activates. So I think a lot more needs to be done in terms of trying to deduce like what specific ingredients have the ability on doing to a certain person's mental state.
mhm,
But I can say that a lot of perfumes or individual notes have even been brought into nursing homes,
mhm,
especially nursing homes that are housing patients that have either dementia or Alzheimer's. And just like music has the ability to do, scents have the ability to bring back memories, and it has shown in some instances that it has a very profound effect to sort of wake up a lot of these dormant memories that these Alzheimer patients have.
yeah. No, it makes 100% sense because, working in the mental health field, I could just tell you how closely related the brain health is into mental health. And, think about it, our nose directly relates itself to the brain as the eyes to the brain. So you're smelling and all that stuff. It's going to alter states of brain and create maybe more calm or if you need to be energized. So they all have different properties. But I mean, if I were to make maybe one critique of the not critique, but a recommendation within the fragrance community is to get more in tune with psychology, with spirituality, mental health, and use that to consumer advantage. Like in the new age, we do that all the time. You want clarity? Here's a clarity spray. Like you want, so we do that with essential oils. So I don't think there's been a big market on that for whatever reason. But, as there's a lot more awareness of mental health and spiritual health these days. And I think people people behind that should be able to recognize these trends and how people are seeking out fragrance as a part of their therapeutic interventions, and that could be a tool that people use. So why not have a two for one thing where yeah, you smell good, but also you feel good, and it corresponds to different states that you're trying to invoke.
I think it's a missed opportunity, because people light incense all the time,
Yeah,
for spirituality or manifestation. Sure, you have the sprays, you have crystals, you have incense, but incense contains fragrance oil. So
yeah,
why does it need to be in incense form? You can literally spray it on your body, and that can have very profound effects as well, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, new age is very niche, no pun intended, but it would be nice to see it more in the mainstream appeal. But it takes a lot of time to, like, heat up an ocean, whatever, or to heat up in
Yeah.
to get industries to change, but, I mean, I think that that might be a next wave of things because 'cause you're seeing, and amongst all industries, like, consciousness is infiltrating itself into many industries, whether that's medical, you go for a physical, doctors now are saying, "Oh, what about meditation?" Like, back in the day, that would never happen.
Mm,
So you're seeing this transformation, and I hope that could, happen in fragrances because there's an undeniable relationship with it. But
yeah.
out of your curiosity, because again, I come from this from a mental health perspective. And again, Escada, I believe, had a fragrance I used to wear called Magneticism back in the day. But and now you're seeing like a big topic of hand of scent mate, where you'll have a celebrity and you're trying to like summarize that person's persona or their temperament with a certain fragrance. Do you feel there's a certain degree of magneticism with certain psychological or soul level temperaments and fragrances? Like, do you feel there's like a connection or an energetic match between that fragrance and that person in a way?
I do think so. Oftentimes I'll look at somebody and I'll think to myself like, "Wow, I can see this person wearing Tom Ford's Tuscan leather," or I can see this person wearing Bulgari black.
Uh,
Oh, there you go.
Oud wood. I brought it for you.
Okay, and oud
Uh,
wood is a great, great fragrance. So I was gonna say if that were Tuscan leather, that would be a cool
that would be great.
synchronicity
Yeah,
because I
close,
was looking
close.
at you when I said that.
So,
Um,
okay, so got the jacket on, you think of, yeah, yeah, but,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But all the time, I think there is sort of an energetic connection between people and smells and, you know, even and it doesn't even have anything to do with, like, demographics, because it's funny, a lot of people will say, like, "Oh, you're in your 40s, you probably wear, like, Cool Water or Curve by Liz Claiborne or maybe Polo Green," or
right.
if it's a woman, it's like, "Oh, do you wear, like, Joy by Jean Patou or Grès by Cabochard?" Or it's not even like that, it's about, like, the person, and this is one of the reasons why I say, like, you really have to get down, or sit down and get to know the person very intimately. It's like a lot of it is, having a finger on the pulse of understanding their, emotions and their personality and
Mhm,
where they're coming from and, what drives them and, what inspires them. And,
mhm,
you know, um, it's very hard for me at least to just look at a person and say like,
mhm,
"Oh, I think he or she would like XYZ." I've been to a lot of consumer driven fragrance events, and it's interesting, you'll get like a really tall, like confident gentleman in a suit, very masculine.
mhm.
And, he goes, "Oh yeah, one of my favorites is Baccarat Rouge." And it's
Right,
like a very sugary, sweet, like cotton
right.
candy type of a
Very
scent.
unisex, yeah, yeah.
Oh, like I never imagined you being a Baccarat Rouge fan, but you get to know the person and it's like, "Oh yeah, it does kind of coalesce with your personality." And I think that's another reason why, and, I think as an outsider, somebody who's not too familiar with the world of fragrances, they might be wondering, like, why are there, 20 new releases every month, you know?
Mhm,
But when you see how diverse people are and how
mhm,
different people are in terms of their interests and their hobbies and their proclivities, it shines light on the fact that we do need a lot of different fragrances to cater to the various personalities. But I think there is very much so an energetic exchange between fragrances and people. Sometimes I think it comes down to individual notes or olfactive
mhm,
profiles. I don't think the composition as a whole, just because I know how complex they can be. And, it's interesting. I've had conversations with people who might say, like, "Oh, I hate patchouli because of
mhm,
the associations I have with it. Oh, I can't stand it. It smells
mhm.
like skunk. It smells like this." But then they'll say, "Oh, yeah, my favorite perfume is Angel by Thierry Mugler." And I'm like, "No,
That
that
has a
has
lot of
patchouli in
yeah,
it, right?" But they
yeah,
only smell the caramel, the ethyl
mhm.
maltol, the cotton candy, and some of the sweeter ingredients, so, go figure.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, people have these black and white type thinkings or hard rules, not recognizing you may not like a patchouli as you know it, but if you're able to blend it well or it just has, like, a certain contribution to a scent, and Terry Mugler, I think, just crossed over, like, maybe a couple years ago, but I do credit Mugler for being so innovative. He was really the first one to bring in the gourmands in, what was it, the '80s or '90s or something like that, and
92 or
I've
93, I think, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, it seems like Angel, at least for females, seems to attract, like, someone who's always in power, like Hillary Clinton, I heard wears it, so it's just
Oh, really?
I feel certain fragrances has to kinda suit you. If you're more of a subdued, quiet person, like, you're not gonna wear like, I don't know, something that's gonna choke people out or something, like, very loud or
Yeah.
rambunctious. You'll be like, "Hey, I'm cool, I'm confident, like, I don't need to whatever," and that's kinda why I try to wear oud wood. It's like, it's not overpowering, it's like, "Alright, I know I'm okay, like, if you wanna come to me, great, but I'm not gonna, like, try to, like, spread everything, and, like, choke out, like, the whole train on a subway, whatever,"
Yeah,
so
yeah.
but, yeah. Do you feel people should be more driven to wear fragrances to make others gravitate to them or feel comfortable with them or even like them? Or does it really, really start with yourself and, like, not giving a crap about what people think? Like, is there a middle ground between those 2, would you say? Or
Oh,
possibly
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's hard to tell. It's kind of like having a magazine on a coffee table, like it's a conversation piece,
Mhm,
right? So it might just be something that you talk about, or you travel to a different destination and you bring home like some kind of a trinket or a knickknack, and now you have
mhm,
like a cool story to tell. And I think with fragrance, like if it makes you feel better 100%, like that should be the point of
mhm,
departure. If you have sort of a baseline knowledge of knowing like why you like it so much or what certain seasons or occasions it's good for, then that's wonderful too.
mhm.
But I don't think people should be wearing fragrance for the sole purpose of attracting somebody else. It's kind of like,
Right.
you see this wave of like pheromone colognes out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And I think they're all a sham, to be honest.
Right,
Like
right, right.
your natural smell is
That's more of a natural thing, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So for me personally, like if people are doing it in like this sort of pseudo manipulative way, then
Mhm,
I'm not on board with that. But if you're doing it because you like it, and maybe you are with a romantic partner who has
mhm,
expressed interest in your fragrance as well, and he or she has told you like, I really like what you have on today, then if you're gonna do it to please them as well, now that's a bonus. So that's another reason to wear it. But ultimately, while I don't berate people or scorn people for wearing fragrance because they wanna, maximize their odds of getting with somebody else, I think a lot of people need to realize that, a lot of that charm, comes from within. And so
mhm,
it's all about doing the inner work and, the self-concept and, working on improving yourself, feeling better about yourself. If fragrance is used as a catalyst in you feeling better about yourself, then great,
mhm.
but it's not going to supplant anything, is what I'm trying to
Right.
say.
Yeah, and you probably wouldn't recommend what Paul Rudd did in Anchorman 1 with, Sex Panther either, right? Like, something that he was so high on, but it choked out the whole, newscast team,
It's got
you
real
know?
bits of Panther in it, though.
Yeah. God, that I mean, that's a lot of people these days, they just don't give a crap, but I don't know. I feel like, yes, you wanna if you ask me, like, I feel like, yes, you wanna smell good, but, in any walk of life, you always have to be aware of what you do and how you behave and how that may affect your surroundings. And I
Yeah,
feel when people come to you, you want them to feel safe and comfortable, and scent could be that cloud that could make or break that. And some of that goes far beyond the self. Like you said, there could be associative components, or maybe someone unfortunately was sexually abused with something like that. You have no idea about. It's a great scent, but you don't know. So
yeah.
it's impossible to satisfy everyone. But I think personally, you wanna wear something you're comfortable with, but it's gonna, have people feel comfortable, around you in a way. Uh,
Yeah,
but
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, some people just, like, douse themselves in it, and, like, people could be asthmatics, or they could have a hard time breathing, it could which is a real medical disability, so I feel like it's a nice, balance in a way. But yeah,
And people have to understand that sometimes less is more, you know?
yeah,
And a lot of that gets figured out, once you start getting into fragrances and understanding like different concentrations and, oh, this is eau de toilette versus this one, which is eau de parfum, or this one is very top heavy, this one is base heavy. So I think a lot of that, and I don't blame, consumers for not knowing every iota of what goes into, perfume synthesis. But yes, I definitely know of many people who will do like 15, 20, 30 sprays just because they want to get, you know,
yeah,
noticed or whatever, especially
right.
when you think about like some of the younger folks in nightclubs and stuff like that. They want to
Oh,
cut
jeez,
through the
yeah.
sweat and the
Yeah.
funk that's in there.
Abercrombie Fierce, all that stuff, yeah.
Oh,
It's still
yeah.
stuck, yeah, something, like, very synthetic or cheap or just, kinda and it could really be off-putting. Like, I've been around people who are asthmatics, and they just tell me all the time, like, how these, like, cheap synthetic smells just, like, they can't have a hard time breathing. So, like, again, it's a big part, but you also, like in any walk of life, be aware of cause and effect in your surroundings, and the we consciousness has to be factored in versus a me consciousness kinda thing, so, yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, but well, awesome. There's a question that I had in mind that's, like, skipping my mind at the moment, like, I just had this so clearly, but now it's, like, evading me, which is frustrating. I know that sometimes, that does happen. But is there, I guess one of my final questions to you is, um, a lot of people will view hobbies such as fishing or going to a restaurant. Some people, I guess, in the new age, they could get a little bit smug with what they identify as spiritual and what they'll like push away as being spiritual.
Mm.
From your personal experiences in your life, like how do you define spirituality and how has your, I guess, immersation and all things fragrances, factored into that definition? That's a hard one. You take a minute. Yeah. It's a very subjective question, I feel in many ways.
No,
Um,
it's a beautiful question, though. And, a few months ago, I drew a parallel between something that, the godfather of the law of attraction, his name is Neville Goddard. He was a famous Barbadian author. And he said he has a book called Feeling is the Secret. And he says, the secret to manifesting anything that your heart desires is to master the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So you wanna operate from the end state. So whatever it is that you wanna do, you wanna be a YouTuber full time, you wanna be a millionaire, you wanna be in that, successful relationship. You have to assume the feeling that would be yours were your prayers or wishes realized. And it's interesting because he makes a connection to the Bible. And in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 11, verse 24, it says, whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it shall be given to you. It doesn't say believe that you will receive it. It says believe that you have received it.
wow.
So it's interesting how you can have, historical figures like Jesus Christ. You can have, contemporary, semi contemporary law of attraction gurus like Neville Goddard, all saying the same thing. Whatever you want to be, whatever you want to have, you need to assume the identity of being that person or already having that thing. And then, of course, in the spiritual world, in metaphysics and in the esoteric, people will say that once you begin to manifest things, either through scripting or visualization or whatever else, the universe will align in your favor and it will create a bridge of incidents allowing you to get your manifestation. And I think a lot of people, including Dolores Cannon and Rhonda Byrne and Neville Goddard, they say do not concern yourself with the how and the when. Just focus on what you want and the universe will conspire to help you achieve it, just like the famous author Paulo Coelho. He
Oh,
said
yeah, yeah.
precisely that in The Alchemist. He says the universe will conspire to help you achieve what it is you truly desire. So I think, and this kind of goes back to one of the first questions that you asked me in this episode, which is, how has spirituality kind of affected me over these past couple of years? And I think a lot of that is just not being delusional because people like to use the word delusional, because delusional means you're tricking yourself, right?
Mm,
And they actually did studies where they looked at an individual and they said, what are the highest vibing emotions? Because here's the thing, people who practice the law of attraction, they say you need to become a vibrational match for the things that you're trying to manifest into your reality. There's nothing that you can't create
mm,
something out of nothing. Everything already exists. You just need to become a vibrational match for these things.
mm,
So they say you do that by raising your vibration. So, what are some of the moods that need to be embodied or employed for you to raise your vibration? There's gratitude, there's
mm,
love, there's contentment. But the highest vibrating state of being is authenticity.
mm,
It's hard to be authentic when you're being delusional because
mm,
delusional means you're lying to yourself. So, instead of saying, I'm a millionaire, and you're not, you're lying to yourself, but you can change the narrative and you can say, I am worthy of being a millionaire.
mm,
I deserve $1 million. And if you believe in these statements, that is going to, I think, accelerate your manifestation. So I think a lot of that was the sort of re-internalization or reassessment of self that happened a couple years ago, like you said, maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago, where I said, who am I? And
mm,
what do I deserve? And what am I worthy of bringing into my existence? What am I worthy or deserving of accomplishing in my life? And so often in life, we do things that are predicated on what other people believe we should be doing in our lives and how we should be unfolding, our own existence. And I've just seen that happen with so many friends and colleagues and family members, and they get into certain career fields or lines of work or even relationships because they're like, yeah, my dad approves of this, but he didn't approve of that. Or, yeah, there's a lot of money behind this job, but, not behind that job. And it's kind of like, I don't know if and I'm sure you've read The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Certainly heard of it. Believe it or not, it's on my to-do list. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful book, and it's one of my favorite books that I have to credit to a good friend of mine who introduced it to me. And there's one scene where the narrator draws an elephant swallowed by a boa constrictor. And I know this seems like a tangential thing, but it looks like a hat in the drawing. And he says, whenever I show it to a person, they tell me, oh, that's a hat. And it's like, no, it's not a hat. It's an elephant being swallowed by a boa constrictor. But he goes, adults have no imagination.
Mm,
And in that book, he talks about how, you know, um, sometimes adults will ask you questions about, like, let's say you have a new romantic interest. What does his father do for a living? Where does he live? What's his ethnicity? How much money does he make? And they feel as though by asking these questions, they fully understand somebody. When in reality, they should be asking that person, does he like butterflies? What is it that makes him smile? What is this song? How does this song make him feel? Like more emotional questions. And I just feel like a lot of people have sort of become so detached with what they truly want from their heart. And another quote from the book, and I may be butchering it, I'm only paraphrasing it, but it goes, you can only see truly with the heart because what is essential is invisible to the eye. So I think it all starts with how you feel about yourself. So going back to spirituality, if there's something that you really, really want in your heart, whether it's a career change or a romantic relationship or whatever the case may be, don't let anybody else grab the wheel of your life to steer you in the direction that they think you should be steered in. Do things for yourself, do what makes you happy and fulfilled. And I think that's the only way we can ever truly personally succeed in life.
very well said. They do so much. They do so many psychological studies about the top 5 regrets of those who crossed over or about to cross over, not crossed over, that would have been a mediumship type thing. But one of them is that you were someone else's version of who they wanted you to be instead of living an authentic life. And you, my friend, are living that. And right now there's been a lot of changes, and it seems like you're fully embracing
Thank
all the things that lead to your enthusiasm, which we've discussed really is the crux of what many view the pathways to God, enthusiasm, and theos, which means the divine within, and finding the things that bring you joy, that bring you light. That's the pathway in many ways, to God. So you are doing that, and you're bringing a lot of light to other people's lives who come to your channel who we just don't know what they're going through, and, you always bring a presence, a light, a joy, and you bring so much passion into the things that you love, and that is, undeniable. So, couldn't thank you enough for that. Now,
you. Thank
Stephen,
you.
my channel, one of the final questions that I always ask my guests is, when we're, journeying through this road of life, we know there is no ending, right? Life is eternal, but, we're always curious as to what is around the bend, and, you know, I have a lot of thinking as to maybe, the direction that you can be going, but ultimately, you're really, you've done enough, you're doing enough, but I'm just kinda curious for you, like, what's around the corner for, Steven Gavrielatos and everything? Because 'cause you've done so much, I can't keep up with you. It's like another event, another night, and, just, like, rubbing elbows with, all the biggest heavy hitters, in the game, but is there,
Yeah.
other shifts that are coming you or ideas or projects? Because you have so much to offer, to so many people. I'm just kinda curious what's kinda brewing inside of you.
Yeah, there's a lot in the pipeline. So a lot more content, a lot of creating, a little bit of writing, a little bit of creative direction, a lot more of putting myself out there, reviewing new stuff, diversifying the portfolio, as it were. going to events, just trying to put myself out there and trying to connect with as many beautiful people as I can. But I think, in tandem or in parallel with that, I also want to pursue love, in many different aspects of life, whether that means, meeting new people or surrounding myself with people I know very little about, just to try to, better my understanding of, different walks of life and how the world works. And so, a lot of it is like, I could say this is what I want to do in the perfume world, and these are my accomplishments, and I want to release this many more fragrances, or I want to create this many videos by the end of 2025. But I think 2025 is going to be focused largely on self improvement and just working on myself, trying to be more benevolent, trying to be a more loving person, more understanding, more empathetic, more magnanimous, for lack of a better word, even though I never view myself as being above anybody else. I'm always equal with everybody else. But I think a lot of it is just going to be an improvement of self concept and just working on my own personal beliefs. And I have you to thank for a lot of that, because watching your channel has definitely, curated and shaped me into a more open-minded, understanding person. And well, I know we're friends on all different social media platforms, but I really appreciate everything that you've done, Jacob.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And I see you as a total unicorn. Like whatever direction you want to go into, you'll find a way to rise and to make an impact, no matter what you set your mind to. And to me, at least, that's a hallmark of someone who's successful. You could drop them almost anywhere, and they'll find a way. And no matter what you do, if you're passionate about something, you'll have the drive, you'll have the right foundations, and it will always lead to something impactful. So, you have the Wheel of Fortune, the tarot card at your hand, like whatever you want to do, like it's very Jupiterian. It's not even a word, like Sagittarian or Jupiter. It's like a planet of expansion. Whatever you seek, it's gonna find its way. So I've got full confidence that whatever you want, that's subjective. But if you um, whatever you wanna do, it will happen. But there's also, like, a shift too in some of your work, like, correct me if I'm wrong, like, now it seems like you're driven to coach people, is that I could be wrong, but, like health coaching, is that something that people could utilize through you? And also, if so, like, what's the best way for a listener of this beautiful conversation to get in touch with Steven?
That's a beautiful question. So first of all, just send me a message on DM on Instagram. I'm quite responsive. Um, I have pursued a health coaching certification recently, which, I mean, for those of you who knew me back in 2022, I was like, quite heavier. Right now I'm 155. I used to be 242. So a lot of it was an energetic pursuit. And I said, I'm not feeling good about myself. I need to lose weight. But a lot of it was also centered around mental health too. And
Mhm.
so, I've been going to therapy for the past 15 and a half months. So
Wow.
just really sitting down and talking to somebody. And, sometimes we just need to vent. And a lot of times
Sure.
we need to speak to somebody who's unbiased and impartial. And it's like, you know what? You're a total outsider, even if it means I have to start from scratch and give you the context and everything. But, just taking care of our minds, our mental health. And, I haven't really pursued the health coaching in a professional capacity yet.
Mhm.
I think it's something that I would like to do down the line. But, for liability's sake, I am
Right.
just giving people friendly advice, as friends.
Right,
So,
right, right.
absolutely. If anybody ever wants to reach out to me, you can DM me on Instagram and I'll try to be as responsive as I can be.
Yeah, jeez. I'm sorry, not trying to get you in trouble, maybe that was my intuition,
I love it.
already a couple steps ahead, but I'm sure within the right time, reason, that will
Mhm.
come, and, obviously, people could find you on Instagram. What's your handle bar again?
So it's Redolescence,
Redolescence.
Redolessence. It's the same thing on YouTube, same thing on TikTok. I'm not really on any other platform, but Instagram is where I reply to messages the most, but
Mhm.
TikTok is where I'm the most active. So,
Okay. Yeah, so I highly recommend anyone who's into all things fragrances or wellness, really get in touch with Steven. Yeah, he's a brilliant man. Really,
thank you.
a pleasure to know such a guy. And my final two questions is A, for viewers listening, what does redolescence mean and the significance to you? If you could give it short, and also if there's a final message, to viewers of the podcast that's really coming to you at this time, to wrap things up.
Absolutely. So redolescence is a portmanteau, which is a combination of two or more words. So I took the word redolent and the word essence. So essence can mean the epitome of something. It can also mean the smell of something. So I was referring to the redolent essence. So I came up with redolescence. I thought I was witty as a 24-year-old, and I just haven't changed it since. And it's stuck. And I think it, kind of has affixed itself to the mental rib cages of my viewers. And to answer your second question, um, yes, there is a piece of advice or a quote that comes to mind, and it's the very last song that the Beatles ever recorded together, not posthumously because we know they recently won a Grammy, but the very last song from Abbey Road, except for the hidden track, which is called Her Majesty. The last song is called The End, and the lyrics for that song go, "In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make." And everything I think is an energetic exchange, but it's also an emotional exchange. And even the Beatles said, all you need is love. So I think as long as we keep loving people and keep forgiving people and being understanding, that's what's going to make the world go round. And, we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. All you need is love.
Gandhi, love that quote. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And that's very reflective of the channel. It's like Wayne Dyer would say, "Take an orange, you squeeze an orange out, you get orange juice. You take each one of us out, you squeeze us out. All you're left is really love. At the end of the day, that's all there is, was, will be." And you, my friend, are embodying, that in your work. So, couldn't
Mhm.
thank you enough, Steve. I'm really excited to see, where you're at and all that's to come. And I trust whatever it is, it's going to leave people in awe and inspired and invigorated in their lives. So thank
I
you.
appreciate you so much, Jacob. Thank you. It means a lot.
All right, Steven Gavrielatos, thank you so much for being on the show.
My
Okay.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, that was a wonderful and impactful conversation. We were really able to get into a lot of Stephen's powerful insights as well as understanding fragrances at a closer look. And I hope that this allowed you all to really own whatever it is that you're passionate about and to really lean into that in your lives because our passions, in a way, are our heaven. So couldn't thank Stephen Gravielatos enough for being our guest and we'll see you here on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder for our next upcoming episode. Thank you for tuning in. Let's continue to ascend and climb the ladder, and please make sure to hit that subscribe button, bell notification, so you could be a part of a growing community and help our algorithm expand and grow. Thank you.